are stories that connect us to ourselves and each other. These stories reveal who we are and show us the many vivid, wild colors of our truth. Welcome to Soul Wanderings, where we raise spiritual awareness and foster connections through these shared stories and personal experiences. And now, exclusively on KGRA Radio, I give you your host for Soul Wanderings Radio. Here's AJ.
Hello, everyone. This is me, AJ, and I am so excited to be here wandering with you tonight. We have a very special guest that I will introduce to you here in just a moment. But in the meantime, I want to share with you that we are hosted on this amazing station, kgradb.com. And as always, I'd like to invite you over to visit this website because I am hosted here and we have a ton of other hosts and shows available to you. You'll want to go and check them out, kgradb.com. You'll learn about them, their shows, their show times, and you might just take a deep dive and be in there for hours because there's so much to see and experience. And there's also a ton of content behind the scenes, which I'll share with you on how you can save some money in joining as a member, a special member of the KGRA family. But that is for later. Right now, I want to introduce to you our guest because she has so much to share with us tonight. And I have a feeling that all of us are going to learn something about ourselves, about our bodies, about taking matters into our own hands. And it's going to be good. Our guest tonight is Nicole Newquist, and she graduated with a Bachelor of Science. She spent over 10 years working in the medical field. She excelled. She was recognized. She got many awards and promotions, and she was participating in sports and yoga, dancing, working out, all of these physical activities. And then in 2014, she experienced an extreme health crash, which forced her to leave her career and give up every single one of her hobbies after being diagnosed with several different things, which she'll share with us. And her journey has been really challenging and brutal, but she's had family by her side, her belief in God in her heart, and she has been making her way, recovering and finding the answers to work with her body. And her mission here and on the other platforms she is on is to help others struggling in the same way. We're really excited to have you, Nicole. Welcome.
Hi, AJ. Thanks for having me.
I was really excited to know that you wanted to share your experiences with us. I've been following you on social, and you recently started sharing, and it's so good because I'm just like deep diving into your account where you're sharing these little 3-minute clips of your journey. And I resonate with a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. And I've referred people, go and check out this channel, go and check out her videos because you can help so many people. And I love that you decided to put yourself out there in the way that you have, so organically, so authentically. And I'm just really excited that you're here to share more with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I explained a little bit about you.
Yes.
There's so much more to know. You were living a completely different life before 2014 than you are now. So why don't you take us back as far as you would like to go to your comfort level, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I guess I could start by saying in 2014, I had this huge health crash. And in the next 6 to 7 years, I was diagnosed with Lyme and a couple of its co-infections. I was diagnosed with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, mast cell activation disorder, hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and eventually cerebrospinal fluid leaks. So I think I got the big ones. There was a lot sprinkled in there as well. But what's more important, like before that, I really considered myself a fairly healthy person. I wasn't on any medication. I wasn't on any supplements even. Like going back to my childhood, I grew up in Wisconsin. I was a fairly active child. I was a tomboy. So I spent a lot of time in the woods, and a lot of people are thinking probably and have asked, so did you have ticks on you back then? Yes, of course. I had ticks often. Our pets had ticks. We really didn't think too much about it growing up in the Midwest back then. And so I would pick the tick off, light it on fire, and that was it. You'd go about your way. And I think like I felt like a normal child. Like I was very active. I was in all the sports. I was a straight A student. And so I kind of had your typical lifestyle. You know, I was really active. It was around probably my teenage years that I started to notice some of the symptoms now looking back that I really kind of like didn't pay too much attention to and didn't think was a big deal. I'm one of 5 children. So my mom and my dad were really busy with us, and, you know, you didn't complain a lot, and we were taught to be like tough and pull your bootstrings up and, you know, march on. So, but I do remember in my teenage years waking up almost every morning with a headache, and it didn't feel really like your typical headache. It felt more like this, like under the water feeling. And every single morning I'd wake up with that. And when I say teenage years, it probably started around 14. And I would be I would experience nausea every single morning. And so my solution back then, I knew where the Tylenol was. I took Tylenol, like without even thinking, almost like it was a supplement or a vitamin. Yeah. And I would skip a lot of my meals and then just go to school. And then the other thing I noticed, like probably around 15, 16, like I mentioned, I was in all of these sports. I was captain of the cheerleading squad. I was in volleyball, basketball, softball, and I really excelled. I was like on varsity in almost every sport. But what I noticed is it would take me time to recover more when my peers would play the sports and move on. So they would play the sports and go off to like maybe an after party or be social. And I would need time to like go home and recoup. And I noticed that in myself, but I didn't notice it as something medically wrong. Right. I just thought, this is strange. Like I want to be at the party, but I can't seem to like, I need this time to recover. So I noticed those things. I noticed going into, you know, like 15 years of age when I started having my period, they were certainly a lot heavier than everyone else's. You know, I started getting cysts on my ovaries. So these were little things that would happen, and you just kind of like, oh, that's a fluke thing. That's a fluke thing. It's not a big deal. You just keep going. And so yeah, that was pretty much childhood. And then when I was in my 20s, I started to notice that I would get these like hives on my body for no random reason. And we couldn't figure it out. And we started to think, you know, maybe it's something to do with detergent. So I would switch up detergent. Maybe it was something I was eating. And we played around, could never quite figure it out. But I just get like these random hives and itchiness. My ears would get like really red. And we'd kind of laugh at it. Like everything we just kind of laughed off and like pushed forward. The other thing that was happening is because of that head pressure that I would get in my head, that was kind of worsening. And they would have weeks where it'd be worse than others. And it would often take me to the family doctor. And over again, I would get diagnosed with sinus infections. So then I was given an antibiotic. Oftentimes it was the Z-Pak or zithromycin. And sometimes I would feel better and sometimes I wouldn't. So again, it was one of those things like, do I really have a sinus infection? Did that antibiotic work? Is this what's going on? But again, you're young and I was active and I was continuing to live a full life. So I just kept kind of pushing along. And then I think it was probably around, so I graduated from college. I went into the pharmaceutical industry pretty soon after that. I was in various disease states throughout my tenure in the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that was fascinating. It was really good because I got to be with hundreds of different types of doctors. And as a pharmaceutical rep, you had to not only learn your medication that you were going to deliver education around, but you also had to learn all the different disease states. And we were tested on them. And so it exposed me to a lot of doctors, disease states, and that sort of thing. And also like the medical terminology and what it was like to speak to a doctor. And so I didn't recognize it then, but now I am so thankful for that because it equipped me with the tools that I would need when I became this kind of intense patient. Because doctors, when I came into the world as a patient, as someone that was chronically ill, I could speak to doctors kind of like on their own terms. I definitely saw them as peers, not these godlike figures that had all the answers. And I knew the medical terminology to throw around. So our conversations were to the point and I got a lot of answers. But going back to like in that early time, when I was a pharmaceutical rep, I definitely noticed again that my energy would wax and wane. And some of these symptoms that I had as a young child were now happening more often. So the head pressure would be longer increments throughout the day. I started to get more fatigued. I could maybe work like really 4 hard, really good days. And then I would find myself needing to recover for 2 or 3 days. Mm. And I was so thankful that I was in the pharmaceutical industry and I had my home office because I really managed my own business and it allowed me to have that time to kill it and then recover. And I knew it was different than my peers, but I didn't know exactly how or why and the cause of it. And again, like I was busy with my life and I had a lot going on. And while I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I was constantly recognized and I've always been an A-type personality. So I was constantly promoted. I became a trainer, went on to other disease states, went into district training and then regional training. And then just kind of dealt with like these nagging symptoms. Mm. But they started to what became like what was originally 2 or 3. They started to like build. And again, I could push through, but I noticed them. And then, and I had one manager along the way, like pull me aside and say, hey, this is what I noticed about you. I noticed like you'll kill it for like a week and you almost like overdo it. You get like 4 times the amount done in a week as somebody else. And then I noticed like, I won't hear from you from like 2 days. So like, what's going on? I'm concerned because you're one of my top people. And if you can't figure out how to like control these, like this waxing and waning of energy, you're going to burn out. And I remember like 2 things. I remember thinking, wow, I'm surprised somebody else noticed this about me because I thought I was hiding it.
Right.
And number 2, like, well, duh, if I had any control over this, I would have already gone there. Right. Like, so like, as I appreciate the good intention in having this conversation with me, but if I knew the answer, I would already be there. But it made me like go introspectively and be like, what is going on? What is going on? And then I think ultimately, as these things were kind of building, I became pregnant with our second son. And during his labor, I remember the doctor asking me to like bear down. And because I'm an athlete and I was like, okay, I'm not only going to bear down, but I'm going to like give this my all. And I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm a Packer fan. And this sounds crazy, but I was like thinking of the Packers. And I was like, okay, I'm like going to do this like a Packer and I'm going to like bear it. And I did. And the delivery was great and it was seamless. But I remember like this explosion going off in my head during the delivery. Wow. And I remember the 2 to 3 days afterward talking to my mom and saying, something's wrong. Something's different than the birth of our first son. And I remember her saying, well, that's because you're older now. Like I was 35. You're older now. That's why. You don't remember. It's always traumatic. And I'm like, no, something's different. And sure enough, as we went home and the days and the weeks proceeded, I was feeling that pressure constantly in my head. I was feeling more fatigue. I'm naturally a very laid back, easygoing person, but I was feeling very irritable. I was having trouble thinking. I was just kind of having a hard time getting through the days. And I remember thinking, well, maybe it is because I have a newborn at home and now I have 2 children and a career and my husband and the whole thing. But then
you just pretend like nothing's happened in a way, right?
You do.
You're like, this. It's no big deal.
You find excuses for it all.
Right.
And then I come from a family that's like, my mom is a German. She's like 100% German, right? And it's very like, you don't complain. Like you just keep going. You move forward. Like you just don't complain. And she's a very good mom and she's very nurturing. But she's going to like hug me and be like, get tough, like go, like keep going. And so I recognized it, but again, made excuses for it. And then around like the 3rd week, I felt really like weird and tired and almost like the blood was being drained out of me. And I talked to my husband. I said, I think we need to something's happening with my heart. I've never felt this before in my entire life. And so we called my doctor, the OB, and he said, I want you to take your pulse. And we did. And my heart rate was down to like 38 beats per minute. And so he said, get to the ER. Something's like awry. So we went to the ER and, they ran all the tests. I had a CAT scan. They put contrast in me before I had the CAT scan. And basically at the end of that 6 to 8 hours, they said, this is bradycardia. We don't know why you're having bradycardia. So bradycardia is just a slower heart rate than normal. And then tachycardia is your increased heart rate. Mm-hmm. So I was experiencing bradycardia, but they didn't know why. So at the end, they just send you home and say to follow up with your doctor. Mm-hmm. So I went home, and the bradycardia did seem to get better. And over the days I did improve. So again, you just think, well, that's like a weird thing. So then I remember going back to work after maternity leave, continuing to struggle with all of these things that I'm talking about. So the fatigue and the headaches and the rashes and now like the irritability. And I was having issues cognitively, like recalling words, executive skills, and so I just couldn't figure it out. And I would mention it to doctors that I worked with during conversations on the side, like, what are your thoughts on this? And I remember telling one doctor, I have to drink coffee all day to get through. I take Mucinex D. I think the decongestant component is helping me thrive because it's stimulating, my system. Wow. And he's like, does it work for you? And I said, well, it seems to be. And he's like, well, just keep doing it then. So I did. And then, along the way, I continued to have that feeling in my head, went back to my family doctor. And over the course of the next year and a half, they kept diagnosing me with more sinus infections. And then at a certain point, my family doctor said, enough of this. If you have this many sinus infections, you need to see an ENT. So it was probably around 2011 that I was sent to an ENT, and I went to the Mayo Clinic. So that was another thing. I was really connected to the different doctors and the facilities in our area. So I always sought out the best of the best and had access to it. So I went to the Mayo Clinic. I met with the ENT. She did her workup and concluded there isn't anything going on ear, nose, and throat wise. I think what you're experiencing is migraines. So for the first time in my life, I've been told hey, we think you have migraines. So she says, I want you to go see our migraine specialist. So I say, okay. So, and I'm thinking, I don't think I have migraines. You know how your gut kind of speaks to you?
Exactly.
But I also
humored it and we're open to what they would say.
Always. And I know as from the pharmaceutical standpoint, one thing that we always struggled with patients is compliance. and just like taking directions. So I tried to like be a really good patient. So she said, you need to do this. So I went to the migraine department at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. They ran an MRI. When that MRI came back, it had 2 little white spots on my brain. So he felt with my symptoms and with the MRI that everything was indicative of migraines. So this guy said, okay, I want to start you on different migraine medication. One of them was sumatriptan. But before I can start you on the sumatriptan, because it has psychotropic effects, like it affects your brain, right? Mm-hmm. I need you to see a psychiatrist to get cleared before I can start you on this medication.
Wow.
So I say, okay, fine. So now I'm in a psychiatry office at the Mayo Clinic, and I meet with this Dr. Gata, who's now a family friend. I absolutely love him. But I'm talking to him, and he's assessing me. He very quickly clears me to go on this sumatriptan. But while I'm there, I say, hey, can I talk to you about something? I think I'm experiencing anxiety. And he goes, okay, tell me about it. And I said, I'm calling on my doctors. I've been in the industry for 10 years at this point. And while I'm speaking to them, like I will feel like the longer I'm waiting for them, and I would stand a lot as a rep. So you have to stand and wait for the doctors to come out. And I'm like, while I'm standing, my symptoms become worse. And I get this head pressure in my head, and it's really difficult to breathe. And by the time they come to me and I'm speaking with them, I'll completely forget the disease state that I'm talking about. And I was in oncology at the time, so I was speaking to oncologists on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to know, like, patients' lives are depending on this information. I was talking about different chemo regimens, side effects. And so when that would happen, when I would have word loss and I would identify, I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. I don't know the name of my chemo drug. Is multiple myeloma a word? This would be internally going on, and there's a doctor standing right there. And so I would get anxiety, and this whole, like, my body would just flood. And so I was talking to Dr. Gata about this, and he said, well, that certainly sounds like anxiety. I'm going to give you this drug. I think it was Celexa.
Another drug.
Let's try this for anxiety, and I'm clearing you to be on these migraine medications. So I get on the Celexa. I go get on the sumatriptan. I was also put on Maxalt, which is a medication you're supposed to take when you feel a migraine coming on. Mm-hmm. The problem was, and I remember asking the doctor, I said, but I have this feeling 24/7. So how am I supposed to know when to take the Maxalt? I said, it just gets worse with intensity as the day goes on, but it's always there. And he said, he looked kind of puzzled, because I think a typical migraine person, like your days, you have maybe 5 days of migraine, and then maybe you'll have some reprieve, and then it comes on again. There's some reprieve in between. I did not experience any reprieve.
It was
so he just said, constant. And so he said, well, when you feel it worsen, then take the Maxalt. So I remember trying to figure that all out. And in the end, we tried several different migraine medications. None of them worked. I eventually was put on something called Topamax, which is commonly used for migraines, among other things. It's an anti-seizure medication. Mm-hmm. And so now we're getting closer to the year. So this is all over time, right? Because you go back for these follow-up visits and they tweak things. And
right.
So now it's somewhere in 2013, I go on Topamax. And in 2014, they decide we're going to titrate up the Topamax. So we're going to increase the dose. And while I was on the Topamax, it never helped, not even maybe. And then as they increased the dose, I noticed that I was feeling even worse, right? And so I'm like, okay, I just got to keep on it. Maybe I got to push through and we'll get to a different place. And right around that time, I had achieved one of the best oncology consultants in the country. And so I was still thriving. And I was awarded a trip to Dublin, Ireland. So my husband and I went off to Ireland. We were there for a week. And I got to tell you, that entire time we were there and I was titrated up on the Topamax, all of my symptoms were exacerbated. So
travel will
my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was like I had intense like light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. I had the head pressure. My confusion was going to a whole new level. Like my husband would say something to me and I'd be like, what is he even talking about right now? And if I disagreed on something, I couldn't even come up with like an argument. Like I couldn't like just have like a constructive conversation. And then I noticed like every little bump we would go on, like on a car ride or something, like would really hurt my head. And while we were like touring through museums, I would get a lot of muscle pain in my shoulders, in my back, in my lower sacrum. I was just kind of all over body pain. And I remember thinking like, what is going on? And I couldn't wait to have that glass of wine and get Tylenol. And I just, crazy enough, even at that point, I didn't think there was anything wrong with me medically. I wasn't thinking I got to get back home and see a doctor. I was just thinking, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why can't I keep up? Why am I experiencing this? You know?
Right. And plus they were upping your medication. You were traveling. You were probably thinking it was a combination of both or one or the other. There's just so many things that you wonder about with your body because you're not finding the relief that you're seeking. So This is a good place for us to stop. We need to take our break. And when we get back, we'll dive in right where we're leaving off. How's that? To all of you, stay close. We'll be right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires, but sound the alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Soul Wanderings, and I am AJ, your host. We are hanging out with Nicole Newquist, and so far, I've learned a lot. How about you guys? Nicole, I'm just like blown away by your ability to remember your journey because there's so much to it. and all of the medications you've been put on, how you just, well, obviously that was your career. You have that in you, but just the amount of knowledge that you've shared with us just in the first part of the show just blows my mind. I'm so thankful once again that you're here to share with all of us. I resonate with a lot of things. A lot of my listeners know a big part of my health journey, and I was listening to you and I'm like, whoa, I've been through that. I took that.
Yeah.
I had that. And so I know I'm not the only one. I know a lot of us have similar symptoms and are put on similar medications. And right, see, like Eric just said, he was on Topamax and it made him feel awful. Topamax was horrible for me.
Yeah.
Oh, and see, and Joe, he's just happy you're here too. Joe, I hope you heal quickly. I'm sorry to hear that you were in the hospital. See, so many people are having, and it can happen in so many ways, where yours is Lyme disease and that specifically happens through a bite. There are other things that are going on in your body that are not, but they are all related in one way or another. And I feel like because of our environments and the foods that we eat and the chemicals that are put on in our environment and in our food and in our cleaners and our products and all of these things, so many people have similar symptoms. It doesn't mean they have what you have, but there are ways to research and really dig in deeper to figure out what is the cause and how can I feel better.
Absolutely. And I know for like the Topamax, for me, I was warned, like I had heard that before I even went on it. So I research everything by nature. So before I start a drug, I usually research it, right? And I had heard that it was referenced as Dopamax, right? And some of the side effects of Topamax. But that was not what I was experiencing. And I can speak to that later because now I think I know why I was having such a difficult time on Topamax. But going back to what I was saying, when I was not feeling well in Europe, by the time we had landed and got home back to Arizona, I identified, and my husband wanted to take me to the ER at that point because I was really like in a lot of pain. And I remember saying, no, I don't want to deal with doctors, and I didn't want to deal with the light in the ER. And so we went home. But the next day when I woke up, I could not move any of my fingers, any of my joints. And that never happened to me in my entire life. So they were completely locked up. And I went to take a shower thinking, well, maybe it will like loosen things up. And I couldn't pick up the shampoo bottle to wash my hair. So I started to cry. I was really scared. I didn't know what was going on. And my husband took me to the ER. And I will tell you, like, they ran all these tests and they were certain that because I had been in another country, I picked up this virus. And over the next several days, I came back positive for mono, cytomegalovirus, Coxsackie virus, positive ANA. And so I was like, what is going on with me? And just the mono in itself, I knew I would have to take time away from work. But I was just blown away with how many different things I came back positive for. I also came back positive for a type of pneumonia. And I was walking around and functioning with all of this. So I thought, wow, like I really need to slow down and take care of myself. And so I took, 4 to 6 weeks off of work to recoup and try and deal with the mono. And then I had to go see a rheumatologist because I had a positive ANA, which could be a sign for like lupus or a different disorder, right? And so I went to see rheumatology. I was cleared of anything in that world. And so I just took some more time off of work, and then I tried to return. But when I tried to return to work 4 to 6 weeks later, I still had all of these symptoms. And I didn't know what to do because I didn't want to lose my career. And I remember talking to my mom, and she said, has anyone tested you for Lyme disease? So my mom was in Wisconsin at this point, and I'm in Arizona. And I remember, because I really didn't know very much at all about Lyme disease, kind of laughing and being like, Mom, this is ridiculous. I've lived in Arizona for almost 20 years. Why would I have Lyme disease? Like, no, this isn't Lyme disease. And I remember being like irritated.
Like, what yeah.
Right. But also I love my mom, and she was really, really adamant. She wouldn't stop about Lyme disease. So I said, fine. The next time I go to the doctor, I will ask him to get tested. Honestly, I was thinking, I don't know if I'm going to have him do that, but I just wanted to kind of quiet her. Well, in the meantime, I thought I'll research it and I'll prove to my mom, I don't have Lyme disease. Nothing matches up, right? So I went and did some research. I came across this. So it's a Lyme disease symptom checklist, and it's an extensive list, and it's done by Dr. Joseph Burrascano, and he developed this list to help other physicians diagnose Lyme disease. So I came across this on LymeDisease.org, which is an excellent resource. LymeDisease.org. You can find this symptom checklist and a plethora of other information. But I'll read to you like some of these symptoms, because as I went through, I have to tell you that I checked almost every single one of them. So, okay, so persistent swollen glands, sore throat, fevers, sore soles, so like the soles of your feet, joint pain, joint swelling, unexplained back pain, stiffness of the joints or back, muscle pain or cramps, obvious muscle weakness, twitching of the face or other muscles, confusion or difficulty thinking, difficulty with concentration, reading, problem absorbing new information, word search or name block, forgetfulness, poor short-term memory, poor attention, disorientation, getting lost, going to wrong places. That was happening to me a lot. Speech errors, mood swings, irritability, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, psychosis, hallucinations, tremors, seizures, headaches, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, vision problems, double, blurry, or floaters, ear pain, hearing, buzzing, ringing, or decreased hearing, increased motion sickness, lightheadedness, tingling or numbness, burning or stabbing sensations, shooting pains, skin hypersensitivity, Bell's palsy, dental pain, neck pain, fatigue, poor stamina, insomnia, excessive nighttime sleep, napping during the day, unexplained weight gain or weight loss, unexplained hair loss, unexplained menstrual irregularity, unexplained milk production or breast pain, erectile dysfunction, loss of libido, nausea, stomach pain, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, heart palpitations, head congestion, breathlessness or air hunger. And that's pretty much the list. So it's a lot. I checked off probably 75% of that list. And so I remember like feeling like, oh my gosh, like I think my mom is on to something.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at how many I checked off, because you just kind of forget about them. Or like I said earlier, you just kind of like no big deal.
Right.
But in the bigger picture, it is a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did more research, and I looked into like what is the best testing to have if you think you have Lyme disease. And what I saw then, as someone that's naive and wasn't familiar with Lyme disease, and it's now I know better, were the best tests in the clinical setting, like at your family doctor, were the Western blot and ELISA. So I went to my family doctor, who I also called on as a rep. He knew me really well. And I said, hey, can you run these tests? And he said, no problem. So he ran both tests, and I'm fortunate enough where the Western blot for me actually came back positive. So, and I say fortunate enough.
Is that not the case in other instances?
No. So, and I wrote this down so I didn't get my statistics wrong. But so the ELISA test has a 50% false negative. So meaning that 50% of the time when you have the ELISA test done and it says that you're negative and you don't have Lyme disease, it's a false reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the other test, the Western blot, 2 of the bands. So the Western blot looks at several bands, and I think they have like different proteins on each band, and they test these bands, right? 2 of the bands that are most indicative of Lyme disease, so much so that they used one of the bands when they first came up with this vaccination for Lyme disease that's now been taken off the market. But that's how strong it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 of those bands were eliminated from the Western blot. I don't know why, but yeah. So the Western blot and the ELISA are by far, when you go to a doctor's office, you're lucky if you get those 2 even done, but still, it's just absolutely terrible testing, and we should be much further along than we are. So I was lucky that in that testing, it caught my Lyme disease. And so when I came back positive for Lyme, I did more research. I tried to figure out what Lyme doctor to go to. I was back at work at this time, and I was talking to one of the oncologists that I worked with, and he said, do not find a doctor in Arizona. Go to the East Coast. Find an ILADS doctor. But
where they have more experience.
So that's scary, right? You're like, why can't I just now I have to go find this special doctor? So that prompted more research, and I had to figure out what an ILADS doctor is. So you'll hear tossed around in the Lyme world, Lyme literate doctor and ILADS doctor. So there's a big difference between the 2. A Lyme literate doctor is someone that is familiar with Lyme disease, and maybe they've treated a patient or 2, but that could be it. Like they're familiar with Lyme disease and what it is and how you can contract it in a way, right? Mm-hmm. An ILADS doctor has extensive training on Lyme disease and the treatment of Lyme disease. So I always tell somebody, if you think you have Lyme disease, number 1, go get this checklist. Go to LymeDisease.org and look. They just have so much information there.
Mm-hmm.
But look at the checklist. And there's a more simplified checklist. I like this checklist because it really gets to like all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I did post that website in the chat rooms on both Facebook and for those of you who are needing it.
Perfect. And then find an ILADS doctor. And so the other website is, let's see, ilads.org. So ILADS.org. So you can go to ilads.org to find an ILADS doctor in your area. Because, the other problem is if you have Lyme and you go to your family doctor, very often they abide by the CDC guidelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the CDC guidelines at this point says that if you have Lyme disease, it's appropriate to treat the Lyme disease for like just a few weeks. I think a maximum of 6 to 8 if you're lucky to get that cleared.
Mm-hmm.
When really, if you have chronic Lyme disease, it takes much, much, much longer than that. And an ILADS doctor not only knows that, they recognize it and they treat you accordingly. So I found an ILADS doctor on the East Coast. His name is Dr. Stephen Phillips. He's world renowned. He was just on The Doctors because he came out with a new book called Chronic. And that is a book that I strongly recommend. You can get it off of Amazon. It's a bestseller. It's Chronic by Dr. Stephen Phillips and Dana Parrish. So Dana Parrish was a patient of his. But I found Dr. Phillips and was fortunate enough. So I was diagnosed with Lyme disease in August of 2014. In October of 2014, I sat down for my first time with Dr. Phillips, and he is in Danbury, Connecticut. So we flew there to consult with him and find out what the heck to do. So
there's just it's like an overwhelming amount of information.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know how many people could go on that list and not check off at least a quarter of them. Because they're going to be symptoms to a lot of different things. But we are so good at just, like we said earlier, bypassing. Like, oh, I'm just tired. I've been overworking, or I haven't been eating right, or I didn't get enough sleep. And we're not listening to our bodies. We're not trusting our gut feeling like, no, something's off. Something is not right. And doing more research into it.
And what Dr. Phillips did, and I think most ILADS physicians are going to find, they look at the symptom checklist, but they also look at your history. Other, they'll apply other testing and labs. So when I went out to Dr. Phillips, the initial consult was over 2 hours. We went through my entire history. We recognized that I had been around ticks, but he taught me and my husband. So a lot of people think you can only get Lyme disease from a tick, right? And you can only get Lyme disease if you live in different areas of the country.
Right.
So that's not the case. You can get Lyme disease anywhere. And so it's really, I feel sad for physicians or patients that feel like, oh, I don't have Lyme disease because I am in Arizona or I'm in California.
Right.
So
what are some ways that you could?
Go ahead.
What are some ways that you could get Lyme disease?
So it's a zoonotic illness, right? Any blood-borne vector. So any insect that can bite a mosquito, a horsefly, a spider. So let's say a spider bites a deer that's infected with Lyme, and then that spider bites you. You can get Lyme disease. Mosquitoes can transmit Lyme disease. Ticks can transmit Lyme disease, but it's not only a tick, and it's not only a specific type of tick. And the other thing is when you get bit by a tick or a spider or a horsefly or something that transmitted the Lyme disease, oftentimes you can get a co-infection of Lyme. So you can get Bartonella or Babesia. And when you go to an ILADS doctor, when they test you, not only are they testing you for Lyme disease, but they're also testing you for these co-infections. And it's really important because the treatment for the co-infections, it's going to look different than the treatment for Lyme disease. And the ILADS physician, so like Dr. Phillips, is not going to do a Western blot, though he paid attention to those results. He's going to use a lab called IGeneX, most likely. So IGeneX, from what I found, is one of the absolute best labs you can use when you're testing Lyme disease and some of the co-infections. So, and that would be IGeneX.com. So IGENEX.com. You can go on there and you can order the kit. I think it's under $25, and you can take it to your doctor and have them fill out the forms to have that run. So you don't have to, you can have your family doctor run it for you. Just take in the kit and ask them to fill out the form. And I'll tell you a story about IGeneX labs in just a second, but IGeneX would be the one that Dr. Phillips used to confirm my Lyme, in addition to other things that he looked at, and also my CD57 count. So there's different opinions when it comes to CD57, but my doctor, like I said, he's world renowned. Like this is what he's known for is treating Lyme disease. He's treated over 20,000 patients in over 20 countries. He told my husband and I that the only thing that will lower your CD57, so specifically CD57 in relation to your natural killer cells, because I think there's also CD57 in relationship to like T cells. But he said the only thing that can lower that is Lyme disease and HIV. So I was tested for HIV. I was negative to HIV, thankfully. That's like a whole other thing, waiting for those blood tests to come back. You know, it's like nerve-wracking not knowing. But when he tested my CD57 and sent off my labs to IGeneX, I was confirmed again for Lyme disease. And my CD57 was so low, it wasn't even detectable. So he said, not only do you have Lyme, but you've probably had it for so many years for your CD57 to be that low. Like you are absolutely a chronic case.
Wow.
And that's another thing. When you have Lyme disease, you can be asymptomatic for a very long time, right? And
that's what's confusing, because people will feel great and then they don't, and they're like, why?
And someone could be asymptomatic their entire life, right? I think what happened with me is I had it, and I think probably I got it when I was a kid, probably. But I think as life went on and I got more insults to my body and I went through more things, and maybe getting mono, and, I had a vaccination that I had a really bad reaction to. It was the HPV vaccination, and I was working for Merck at the time, and it was their vaccination. And it was just something I was supposed to get, at my annual OBGYN checkup, and I got it. But I had a very bad reaction to it. So I think those little insults along the way that compromise your immune system can open up those gates to something smoldering or underlying like Lyme disease. And I think that, in addition to, I was working so hard and covering like over 30 states when I finally crashed. I think lifestyle, different things that happened with my body just brought my immune system to a state where the Lyme was able to kind of like break through and take over.
Yeah, that sounds exactly when we overexert ourselves in any way, those symptoms are going to start coming through even stronger.
Yeah. And the thing I wanted to mention too is, so Lyme, they call Lyme like the great imitator, because it can, so many people are misdiagnosed with other conditions when really it's Lyme, and because it's the great imitator, right? So it can present itself as lupus or MS or ALS or Parkinson's or fibromyalgia. Like, it shows up in a slew of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to mention specifically, so there's a doctor, his name is Dr. Alfred Miller. And I encourage anyone listening to go to YouTube and to type in Dr. Alfred Miller Lyme, and 4 YouTube videos will come up. And they're they're like a couple minutes long. So it doesn't take long to like watch all 4. He is retired now. He was a doctor at the Mayo Clinic. So his daughter-in-law was around age, she was in her early 40s, and she became severely ill. And so she went to 3 of the best medical academic institutions in the United States. And they all assessed her, right? And at first they thought she had MS. So, and they decided that by her brain imaging and how that appeared. And so all 3 said, we think you have MS. Well, then as she progressed and they looked at her more closely, because of the way she was presenting physically, they then said, no, you have ALS. So it was decided by all 3 institutions. They all agreed, Dr. Alfred Miller, your daughter-in-law has ALS. Well, this just didn't sit right with him. And he thought, this isn't making total sense. So he continued to research. And in his research, he found, wow, like a lot of her symptoms are overlapping with these symptoms that he's reading about in Lyme patients. So he contacted all 3 of these academic institutions, like the best in the United States, right? And he's at the Mayo Clinic, and said, hey, like, did you test her for Lyme disease? And they all 3 said yes. And we used either the Western blot or the ELISA. So those were the 2 that I just shared with you, right?
Right.
One or 2 of them used both. And all of them came back negative. So they concluded she does not have Lyme disease. Well, Dr. Alfred Miller was like, it's not sitting right. I want her retested with IGeneX.
Mm-hmm.
So he sent her blood work off to IGeneX, which is the lab that I referred to earlier that I feel is like the best lab to be assessed for Lyme disease. And she came back positive.
Wow.
So she also her CD57 count was also really low. And if you go and listen to his videos, he'll talk to you about how the only thing that he's aware of that causes a low CD57 is Lyme disease as well. So I think that's an important message, because a lot of people will be like, yeah, I got tested for Lyme. I don't have it.
Right.
Well, what test was used, and who did you see? And did you go see an ILADS doctor? And did you use IGeneX? Because if not, and you have all these symptoms and you're presenting like a Lyme patient, if you're somebody I love or you're close to me, I'm going to beg you to go further.
Right.
Because look at, these were 3 of the best academic institutions in the country that said his daughter-in-law had ALS. You know, that's a 5-year deal, and she didn't. She had Lyme disease.
Right.
And there's a million stories about patients misdiagnosed.
Yeah, it's very curious to me as well, because I've been diagnosed with MS, as you know, and a lot of my listeners know, and yet everything that we've tried just isn't really really working. I'm still feeling A, B, and C and still having these experiences. And we had the opportunity to have a great phone call, and I learned so much from you in that phone call, and I did some more information. I'll definitely be taking some different tests to dive in a different direction, because it's never really sat with me, right? You just you know your body more than anyone else does, and that's such an important message to share with everyone. Just because you've been diagnosed with something and you still don't feel right about it, or you still feel something is off, don't take that information as gospel. Doctors know a lot of things, but they're human just like the rest of us. They make mistakes and they overlook things just like anyone else would. We need to take our last break of the show. The last hour is commercial free, like always. So if you guys sit in there and hang on tight, we have a lot more to share with you. Nicole does, that is. We'll be right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires with Sound the Alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Soul Wanderings. And like I said at the beginning of the show, you can watch my show and tune in live every week, every Wednesday on kgradb.com. My show's hosted there as well as several other amazing shows. Such a great lineup throughout the week, something for everyone. And we have the shows listed and presented to you right there on the website, but there's also a ton of goodness behind the scenes, and you can get front row access to all of it by joining the members area. And I have a promo code for you to use if you decide to join us behind the doors. The promo code for you to use for an annual membership would be SOUL21, which is SOUL 21. I invite you to use that for 30% off your annual membership. Save some money. We all like that. Plus, build our big brains with good information that is shared with us on all of these evenings with these amazing hosts and shows. So I hope you guys join and learn a lot, experience a lot, and meet new friends, because there's ways to do that too. And tonight we are hanging out with Nicole, and she is sharing with us her health journey, and it's been quite a journey indeed. But I'm just blown away at your ability to initiate conversations with doctors. I feel like people are intimidated by them, and so the doctors spend 5 to 10 minutes with their patient, give them what they think but don't know in a lot of cases, and they leave with that as their truth, as their gospel. Well, he said I have this, so that's what I have. And some people really latch on to that diagnosis or that medication that they said would fix them or heal them or make them feel better. And then they still feel off. They still don't feel right. But instead of going and researching some more or asking different questions, they just sit with those symptoms and that diagnosis. And I know a lot of people who have done that and have really taken ownership of that. And they still feel awful, and it becomes their life. And I feel like it's a disservice to yourself. And you are allowed to feel good, even if you have a diagnosis that you know is true and that resonates with you and your symptoms. There are ways that you can feel better. There are ways that you can heal your body. You don't have to suffer. And Nicole, you're a great example of that. Not that you go without suffering. You have your fair share of that indeed, but also you have the knowledge and information to back you up on how to calm some of those symptoms. And that's because you decided to show up for yourself.
Yes, because it definitely came over time. And by continuing the search and looking for answers, I think it was definitely helpful for me because of the industry that I came from and spending so much time with many different doctors. It helped me identify them again as people, as peers. And I think so many of them have the absolute best of intentions, but they're just people. And we show up and they have these time constraints because of insurance and all of the red tape, right? Mm-hmm. And we would like to think that when we leave the office, they spend hours thinking about us at night and trying to figure it out. And sometimes that happens, but we're one of many. And so that time they spend with us, they use the tools that they have and they kind of come to these decisions and they give us a diagnosis, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's right. And sometimes maybe not, or maybe sometimes it's partially right. Like maybe they got a piece of the puzzle, but not all of it. So I think it's really important to rely on you, to rely on yourself and your intuition and really dig deep and think, wow, okay, this diagnosis that they're giving me, does this make sense to me? Does it feel right? And then maybe if you're at that point where you're like, it does feel right, and you try treatment, but you're not progressing. Well, why are you not progressing? Why are you, different maybe than others? Maybe that's a red flag telling you should push further and look further. Maybe you got as much as you could from this one particular doctor, and maybe you go on to the next. But always listen to your gut. And I think, challenge doctors when they diagnose you with different disorders and ask them how they came to this diagnosis, and research, but don't stop there, because ultimately I do think you have the power to not only heal yourself, but to find the answers. And don't let anyone gaslight you. If you know you have these symptoms and you go to a doctor, and I cannot stand this. I'm so fortunate. And I think it's because I was a pharmaceutical rep and I worked with so many of these doctors. Only one time in my 7 years did I have someone say, your symptoms are attributed to anxiety. And I will go back and revisit with that doctor when I have the energy and let him know everything that came to fruition. But if you have all these symptoms and you know what your normal is and you know what your not normal is, and you go to a doctor and they're telling you, well, I think it's anxiety. I think it's because you're a new mom. I think it's because of this. Don't let them tell you that. Right. You, right? And so you don't have to accept that. Don't let someone do that to you. They're not gods. They're just people, and they're just trying to do the best that they can and figuring it out. And they are not always right. So I do want to give another example, if I can, about a patient that was, okay. So Chris Christopherson, right? Big time music star.
I think everyone probably knows who he is.
Right. And I think he's in his 80s now, right? But still a total legend. So he had gone through some medical stuff and would go to the doctor. And over the years, he was diagnosed. So I wrote this down so I wouldn't get it mixed up. But he was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, sleep apnea, anemia, chronic muscle spasms. His knees hurt, so he would go and get these steroid shots in his knees. He was given a pacemaker for heart arrhythmias. And then eventually he was diagnosed and treated for Alzheimer's. So this is Chris Christopherson, who has access to great medicine, right? And this is what he was told. Well, it didn't, thankfully, sit right with his wife. And as he was going, so he was diagnosed and on treatment for Alzheimer's for over 3 years and was on 2 different medications and was under the care of 2 different neurologists. And still it wasn't sitting right with his wife. So she continued to research. And in her research, again, came across Lyme and the symptoms of Lyme. And something sparked in her that was this is happening with Chris. I need to get him tested. So I can't tell you exactly what test she used. I'm not sure. But I know that when she tested him, he came back positive for Lyme disease. He went through treatment for Lyme disease. His treatment, you can look up his treatment. It's out there. But it consisted of antibiotics. And then he also used hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And ultimately, the majority of all of his symptoms cleared. He does not have Alzheimer's. And he regained his memory, his cognitive, because he was told he has dementia.
Wow.
But now he went back out on tour. And this whole time he had Lyme, and every single one of those symptoms, right, shows up on that Lyme symptom checklist that I went through with you guys. So these are just 2 that always come to my mind. As you research, you can find more and more. It happens every single day. Mm-hmm. So if you think you have Lyme, keep pushing forward and go to some of the sites that I shared with you. I would check out StephenPhillipsMD.com. So that's the doctor that I see. I just think he's brilliant and really cutting edge when it comes to Lyme disease. He at one time was the president of iLads, which is the Lyme professional website that I shared with you. So anyway, so then I started treatment with Dr. Phillips, and that included oral antibiotics. We eventually did do IV antibiotic therapy, probably after 1.5 years of oral antibiotics. We used herbs. We pulsed different treatments, meaning we went on for 3 weeks and then took a week break and then went on for another period of time. He did test me. So he used a lab called Galaxy Labs. So that's the lab that I would say is best for looking for Bartonella, which is a co-infection of Lyme disease. When he tested me for Bartonella through Galaxy Labs, I again came back positive. Wow. So that is something in addition that he treated me for with a different type of antibiotic regimen. But I will say, and I think this is really important, when we were pulsing, it was tetracycline. I forget what was the other antibiotic that we were using in conjunction, but I was a couple weeks in and we were titrating my dose. And every time I would be on the antibiotics, I would feel so much worse, right? And we would attribute it to something called a Herxheimer reaction. Have you heard of a Herxheimer?
No, not until I saw it on your email. Mm-hmm.
So a Herxheimer reaction is just like an exacerbation of your existing symptoms along with new symptoms that Lyme patients can experience when they're going through treatment. And Dr. Phillips has a better explanation on his website. Mm-hmm. But basically, my understanding is it's attributed to like die-off from the Lyme bacteria and like the toxins that circulate through your body. And then something called blebbing that he, again, gets further into on his website. So that gets pretty sciencey for me. But it's expected that when you're going through these treatments that you're going to feel a lot worse. And then the hope is that then you feel better kind of after each cycle.
Right.
And there were some symptoms that were improving, but there were some symptoms that were not. And then as we titrated up on the tetracycline, I woke up one morning and I had the swirling in my right ear. It felt like hot lava. And I thought, what's going on? And I was actually at my mom's house because when I was going through treatment, my husband would stay with the kids and I would go to my mom's house. She had two homes at the time, one in Arizona and one in Wisconsin. I didn't want to see I didn't want the kids to see me going through treatment because it was brutal. Like beyond anything, I don't want to diminish chemo in any way. But I had lived in that world and saw a lot of patients going through chemo treatment. And I had never seen anything like what I was experiencing with Lyme treatment. Like it was absolutely horrific. In fact, in one of the days prior, I went to stand up and I passed out and I broke 2 ribs. So that was, when I was going through treatment, just another thing that happened.
Yeah.
But that,
wow.
But that particular day when I woke up, I felt like I had a stroke and the whole room was like off kilter. It looked like someone shook it up in a snow globe. And I cognitively way inside, I knew something was terribly wrong, but I didn't know what had happened. I thought for sure that I had a stroke.
Yeah.
And from that day going forward for like the next 2+ years, I could barely get out of bed. So this was during Lyme treatment. So something happened huge, right? And I could no longer read at all. When I would look at the TV, I couldn't make sense of what I saw on the TV. I can't even explain it. It was just the scariest time of my life. And anytime I would sit or stand, all of the symptoms would become extremely exacerbated. And the light sensitivity and the sound sensitivity became so bad that I wore headsets for 2 years straight. I wore sunglasses 24/7 inside and out. Mm-hmm. And at first, in the very beginning, we thought, well, this must be this Herxheimer reaction, right? It's a really severe one, maybe because I've had Lyme for so long. But as time progressed and when we would take breaks from the regimens and I wasn't seeing improvement, it was kind of clear that something more was going on or in addition to the Lyme.
Is that normally the case when you have been diagnosed with a disease like Lyme or an autoimmune disease that you have several other diseases or viruses in your body?
So I think it happens very, very often.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was prepared for that, but I wasn't prepared for whatever this was.
Mm-hmm.
I understood why maybe I had, because before this, as I was going through treatment, I was also diagnosed with mold illness. I was also diagnosed with this thing called the MTHFR gene mutation. I was diagnosed with several different viruses. And I thought, okay, I can see how this is all kind of connected to Lyme and how when your immune system is compromised, these other things can sneak in, right? But whatever happened this day felt like a stroke. And so it did not improve with going off treatment. And so we couldn't figure it out. And around that time, someone mentioned, well, have you, it could have been Dr. Phillips, have you been tested for POTS? So POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And many patients with Lyme or other infections will have POTS. And so I said, no, but maybe I should go get tested for POTS. So I went back to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, and they test you by doing this tilt table test. So they put you on this table, they lower it kind of like this, right? And you're strapped so that if you faint, you're strapped into this table, and they look at your heart rate, they look at your blood pressure, they look at all these things. And if you fail the test, you have POTS. Well, while I was on the table, I completely passed out and everything, my blood pressure dropped, my heart rate went up, and they concluded, okay, yes, you have POTS. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe this explains all these other weird symptoms that came on after I started treatment. So the Mayo Clinic at that time said, and it was Dr. Goodman that diagnosed me. People come from all over the world to get diagnosed by him for POTS. So I felt pretty confident in that diagnosis, but they don't treat you, or they didn't in 2015 at the Mayo Clinic for POTS. They referred you to a neurologist. So I was referred to a neurologist in the area that is supposed to be the best for treating POTS. And I went to him, and I referred him as Dr. Potts, because if I have something good to say about a doctor, I'll say their name all day long. But if I don't have anything good, I don't want to hurt them, so I just don't use their name. So it's just Dr. Potts. So I went to him and said, okay, I've been diagnosed with POTS. Here are all my symptoms. And I remember, and Jimmy, my husband, was always with me at every single doctor's appointment. And I'm so thankful, because he could always back up not only what the doctor said, but he could help me remember the story and help reiterate what was going on. And I remember him saying, does anything help you feel better? And I said, yeah, like lying flat and drinking coffee. Like those are the two things that help me feel better. And I remember him looking at me really kind of odd and saying, like, okay, well, that's strange, but that was it. So I mentioned that because those are two huge symptoms for something else that I would be diagnosed with that he should have known. But he just thought it was strange. He recommended a medication for me. I tried fludrocortisone, which is supposed to help with POTS. It didn't help my situation. And then he mentioned another medication. And I remember saying, but doesn't that cause bradycardia? And I have bradycardia, so shouldn't I stay off that medication? And I remember him going, oh my gosh, you're right. So it kind of takes away your confidence, when you're going to someone. But so he never really helped me very much. And then as I continued with treatment, and at a certain point, I stopped all antibiotics and just focused on herbs. I continued to push forward. And I remember hearing about this physician, Dr. Mary Ackerley. I can't recommend her enough. So she's out of Tucson, and she's at mypassionforhealth.com. I went and saw her because she's known to help patients with biotoxin illness and patients with Lyme disease that are experiencing neurological symptoms and like head pressure and some of the symptoms I was dealing with. So I went to see her. I was on a waiting list. It took a while. And I was in her office, and within minutes, she looked at me and she's like, okay, so you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I can't even tell you how irritated I was because I thought, another doctor didn't take the time to read my file. She has me confused with another patient. I had never heard of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in my entire life. And I said, no, like I don't have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I don't even know what that is. And she said, you may not know that you have it, but I am 95% sure that you have it because I'm looking at your chart. You have postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, the POTS. You have, so those hives I was complaining of earlier on in my 20s, that's mast cell disorder. Wow. So she says you have these two things. You have other things that point to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So she had me stand up in her office. I was supposed to put my arms straight out. She measured the span of my arms. It was slightly longer than my height, which can be indicative or a sign of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, right? She asked me to do things like, I don't know if you can see this, but I can put my thumb down to my wrist. She asked me to touch the floor, and I can with flat hands. She asked me to kind of put my hands behind my back in the prayer position. She just had me do kind of all these like weird things. And I thought, why am I doing all this, right? But basically everything that I was doing showed her that I had this hypermobility. And then I have mitral valve prolapse. I had the cysts on my ovaries when I was younger. So all of these things are symptoms of a person with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Unbelievable.
So she said, you need to go get tested by a geneticist, and you go back to the Mayo Clinic, which I had been going to, right, and get tested. So I thought, and then we talked about the Lyme, and she made some suggestions, right? But she's like, come back to me once you see this geneticist. So I go to the geneticist at the Mayo Clinic, and so one of the things they use to test you for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is something called this Beighton scoring system. And so I would direct you to www.ehlers.danlos.com. It's the Ehlers-Danlos Society. If you go onto Google and you put Ehlers-Danlos Society, it'll bring you to this website, and it'll give you all the information on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and the testing. There's 13 different types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I went to her, and she did this Beighton scoring system with me. And the highest you can score is 9, and I scored 9 out of 9. So within probably 15 minutes, she said, 100%, you have hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I said, well, what about the other 12 types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? Shouldn't I be tested for all of them? She said, no, the only one I'm going to test you for is vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because you could die from it like at any moment. So we got to, rule that out. But the rest of them, if I tested you for it and you turned out positive, the treatment would be the same and the lifestyle would be the same. So we already know you have hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'll test you for the vascular and move forward. And by the way, the best person to treat you for this is Dr. Potts. Yeah, right?
No.
So I was like, what? I've been going to him. Like, I had been going to him for a couple of years at this point. And I thought, well, if he's the best, then how come he didn't even mention it? He's never assessed me for it. If I am like that high on the scale, why didn't he see it? Right? Mm-hmm. So she tests me for the vascular. That comes back negative. I go to see Dr. Potts, and I bite my tongue, and I know like how to like talk to the doctors and not like, I'm watchful for their ego, get what I need and move on. And I said to him, so I was at the Mayo Clinic. I saw this geneticist. She diagnosed me with hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Like, what are your thoughts? So he does the workup and the whole thing, and Jimmy's there, and he goes, well, yeah, you too have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So
like, you could have told me this forever ago.
So that was so frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, then that same week, I go back to Dr. Ackerley, right? And I think she is like the be all end all now, because like within 15 minutes, she figured out. So the other thing that's important. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a connective tissue disorder. It affects all of your connective tissue, and your whole body is made up of connective tissue, right? So when your connective tissue is struggling, you're in a state of constant fight or flight. Like
What
it's your
does
body.
that look like? What does that feel like for someone that experiences that?
So it's hard because this Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis to me is still somewhat new.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you a lot of people complain of different things, and some people will have just a few symptoms and some people are wheelchair bound. But it'll affect their joints. So there's like a lot of joint pain. There's constant fatigue and that heavy feeling that I was talking about, because your body is really constantly struggling 24/7. I've heard where some are more susceptible to infections, right? Because your body is always in that fight or flight state, you can be more susceptible to infections. They'll get POTS, which is the postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So when you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, they have something called the trifecta. So almost always, if you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you then have POTS and mast cell disorder. So the POTS in itself, people are constantly thirsty, fatigued, head pressure. The longer they're upright, the longer the day goes on, their symptoms become exacerbated. So it kind of all goes together. And then you have like the rashes and the hypersensitivity to foods, to chemicals, to smells. So it can really get kind of like the symptoms can get pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would go to that Ehlers-Danlos Society website, and it'll share with you the different symptoms. For me, it was the fatigue, the flu-like symptoms, the aches. But here's where it gets really confusing, right? So, and this is where I hope I don't like lose anyone. A lot of these symptoms overlap with Lyme too. So then, but Ehlers-Danlos is a genetic disorder. You're born with it. And the chance of you passing it on to a child there's a 50% chance.
Wow.
So one thought is obviously I was born with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And then it possibly made me more susceptible to an infection like Lyme disease, right? Then I get Lyme disease. But this POTS thing, which can be attributed to Lyme disease, but also to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, at this point, as I'm diagnosed, what is that attributed to? Well, we don't really know, right? But so it gets confusing in the overlap of symptoms and trying to figure out what's what. I just know I felt very confident in that I tested positive for Lyme disease. I was responding to treatment. And then everything on the Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, I mean, I saw the geneticist, you're born with it. Like that was just something I couldn't deny was happening. Right. And then I had the trifecta, the POTS and the mast cell disorder and this Ehlers-Danlos. So I go back to Dr. Ackerley, who saw this in me, and say, you were right. Oh my gosh. Like I saw the geneticist, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And she's like, well, of course you do. At that point, she said, okay, so you have this trifecta going on, but I also want you to know that because you have this connective tissue disorder, oftentimes people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome can get cerebral spinal fluid leaks.
On top of all of that.
So, and cerebral spinal fluid leaks present in a way, so symptoms for a cerebral spinal fluid leak, and I have this like on my TikTok page, I did a TikTok on it.
I do want to refer everyone to your TikTok, and it's been flashing on the screen. We'll share it later, but if you want to follow her complete journey, because this is a 2-hour show, she has over 100 videos on there sharing it. So good. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. So chronic headaches and head pressure, neck and shoulder pain, dizziness, vertigo, light and sound sensitivity, nausea, an altered sense of smell. So for me, when I would wash my hands, the soap smelled like gasoline to me. Seizures. I didn't get seizures. Some people get seizures. Confusion, getting lost again. Tachycardia, difficulty in thinking. And then I think the really big one is all of those symptoms exacerbating the longer you're upright or the longer the day goes on. So again, I was like, well, yeah, like that's happening to me. That is 100% happening. And even more so when we titrated up on the tetracycline. So now knowing what I know, when I was on Lyme treatment and I was on tetracycline, so tetracycline can increase your intracranial pressure. So can doxycycline.
Wow.
So if I have connective tissue disorder and I'm susceptible to leaks, and then you increase my intracranial pressure, I can blow a leak. And I think that's exactly, everyone agrees at this point, that's exactly what happened. For the most part, everyone agrees. When I titrated up on tetracycline, that the reason I woke up that next morning with that swirling in my ear and feeling like I had a stroke is probably at that time I sprung a major cerebral spinal fluid leak. So Dr. Ackerley says, I need you to go back to Dr. Potts and find out if you have a cerebral spinal fluid leak. And I said, I don't want to go back to him. Like, he's irritating me. Like, I feel like I'm having to like kind of lead him along this journey. She's like, go back, get what you need. So I go back to Dr. Potts and I say, okay, so I have Lyme, I have POTS. Another doctor thinks I may also have a cerebral spinal fluid leak. Can you bring up my MRIs from the past? Because at this point, I probably had 5 MRIs done, right?
That's something that can be detected on an MRI?
It can, but it's really difficult to find. But something you can look for on an MRI is something called brain sag. And it's when your brain is sitting lower than it should. And there's only 2 things that can cause brain sag, to my knowledge, and from what I've learned. And that's Chiari, which is a genetic disorder that you're born with, right? Or a cerebral spinal fluid leak. Because basically, you don't have enough cerebral spinal fluid. The cerebral spinal fluid normally like bathes your brain and supports and cushions your brain. And then it bathes and supports and cushions your spine. So if you have a leak, then your brain is not held up in that water and it starts to sink down toward your spine, and then it hits all those nerves and can cause all of these symptoms, right? So when I went back to him, I said, can we pull up the MRIs and look at them together? So he had already read the reports from the radiologists in the past that read unremarkable, normal MRI. So I said, okay, I know that that's what the reports said. Can we look at it together? So he pulled them up. And Jimmy's sitting there with me, and he does his measurements and the whole thing. And he goes, well, yeah, you have brain sag. And I said, can you tell me what, and I'm like biting my tongue. And I said, can you tell me what MRI you're looking at? And he said, I'm looking at the one. So this is February of 2020. And he said, this is an MRI from 2015.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
So I'm like almost in tears, right? Because I have a mom and I'm losing time with my kids. I could go through, I've lost 3+ years of holidays. I wasn't able to move our son into college. I lost so many years. And he just said, from 2015. And I said, can you tell me who ordered that MRI? And he said, I did. So what happens, and again, not to make this doctor to be like the bad guy. This just happens too often. And it's another thing, like I really want to warn people. When you have imaging done and you go to your doctor and they tell you that it's unremarkable or that everything's normal, I really encourage you to have them pull that imaging up in front of you and look at it with you. Because a radiologist only can catch so many things. And it really takes a trained eye to catch many, many of these things, right? So you really need either a second set of eyes or somebody that's more trained. And so when he looked at it, and he did have that training, which is probably why I kept getting sent back to him, he did recognize that I had brain sag. And immediately I knew at that point from my research that I had a leak. And so this is the other thing I would really highly recommend, because I knew that I was going to see him. And because I knew I potentially had a cerebral spinal fluid leak, in advance, I did my research and I found the top facilities that accepted my insurance that were familiar and treated cerebral spinal fluid leaks. Wow. And the top facilities in the nation are Cedars-Sinai, Duke University, and Stanford University. And so when he said that I was leaking, or most likely had a cerebrospinal fluid leak because of the brain sag, I said, thank you. Will you please refer me to Duke, Cedars-Sinai, and Stanford? And he said, absolutely, no problem. So he referred me to all 3 facilities. And it's another kind of long conversation of how I eventually got into Stanford. But I was accepted into the cerebrospinal fluid leak program at Stanford. And after Dr. Ian Carroll, who is just the be all end all. So again, just one of those doctors that I attribute to saving my life. When he looked at all of my imaging, and they ran more at Stanford University, he said, we can't find exactly where the leak is, but because of all your symptoms, because of the brain sag, and because we have identified 16 suspicious leak sites on your spine,
that's a ton.
We want to move forward with patching you.
Oh my
So
gosh.
From November of 2020 until I literally came back 2 weeks ago from another patch type procedure, I've had over 7 different patches on my spine, and then a procedure called a venous embolization. And those all were an effort to seal off cerebrospinal fluid leaks. And since then, the symptoms that were really debilitating me, that kept me in bed, these POTS type symptoms, they are slowly like falling away, and my brain imaging is pretty much normal at this point, with a few exceptions.
Wow.
We still think I have a few leaks, and their plan is to continue patching as we go forward.
Mm-hmm.
But 100% that has been life-changing. And I wouldn't have known that if I would have stopped with Lyme disease.
I was going to say, if you would have just accepted that diagnosis as the end all, you wouldn't be able to get the relief that you're now receiving. What are some of the symptoms of CSF?
So what's really crazy? So another video that I'm really going to recommend and urge people to watch, especially if you're having any of these symptoms, and I'll go through that checklist, is to go on YouTube and put in the mystery headache, Dr. Ian, I-A-N, Carroll, C-A-R-R-O-L-L. Because here's the other thing. Remember when I told you I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and there's the trifecta that you have POTS and mast cell and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. If I didn't have Dr. Ackerley, and if I had another doctor that said, well, yeah, you have POTS because you have either Lyme or Ehlers-Danlos, and POTS goes with both of those disease states, I probably would have stopped and been like, well, I have all these symptoms because I have POTS and I have Lyme and I have Ehlers-Danlos. So this is my life and it stinks, but I'm going to have to learn to live with it. Literally, I've heard patients say that doctors will say, you have POTS. You have to learn to live with it, manage your symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. If I would have stopped there, like I said, I would probably still be in bed and not functioning really at any level. It's such a debilitating state. Because I went on, and what Dr. Ian Carroll talks about in the mystery headache on YouTube is that so many of these patients that are diagnosed with POTS actually have a cerebrospinal fluid leak. And one reason is because these patients with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome have POTS, right? But the patients with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome also have weakened connective tissue. So if your so you have your spine, right? And then there's this casing that goes around your spine called your dura, and it's made up of connective tissue. So if you have a connective tissue disorder like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that dura becomes weak, more fragile, thinner, and it's more susceptible to leaks. So if you have a connective tissue disorder and you have a coughing fit, or you bear down in labor, like I did with Colton, our second son, you can spring a leak.
Wow.
And when you have a leak, you can be diagnosed with POTS because the symptoms are very POTS-like, when truly you have POTS secondary to a cerebrospinal fluid leak. And once you get patched for the cerebral spinal fluid leak, once they can identify that area and patch you, the POTS goes away. So I've been retested for POTS. I no longer have POTS.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and the symptoms, so again, it's just, so the POTS symptoms and the CSF leak symptoms really kind of overlap. Mm-hmm. And it's that head pressure. Some people will get ear pressure. It feels like, so George Clooney had a cerebral spinal fluid leak. And you can read about him in the tabloids. And he talks about how it was so debilitating. It was one of the only times in his life that he considered taking his life. But he said when he had a cerebral spinal fluid leak, it felt like he was under the water and breathing through a straw. So breathing becomes difficult. It feels like you're underwater. Just everything's very heavy, head pressure, ear pressure, cognitive issues in a big way. Some people talk about getting lost, confusion, tinnitus, light sensitivity, that altered sense of smell that I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. Let's see, nausea, dizziness, vertigo. And then I think the big thing with POTS and with CSF leaks is all of those symptoms exacerbate when you're upright. So you could be lying flat and maybe have some of the symptoms, but they're not at this heightened state, right? Or some patients, if they just sprung a leak, will say if they lay flat, that their symptoms go away completely. The longer you have a leak, the longer it can take to kind of recover. So you might go to a doctor and they say, lay flat. And do you feel better? And a patient might be saying, no, I don't feel better. Oh, well, then you're not leaking. Right. But that's not the case at all. If you're a chronic leaker, it takes a lot more time to recover. It's not as easy as just laying flat. But one thing everyone will say is once they're upright, all of those symptoms will become exacerbated. And the longer they're upright and the longer the day goes on, those symptoms become more and more and more pronounced till you get to a point where you can't even just function. Mm-hmm. And then you just have to lay down and like wait for the next day to come. And it's like Groundhog Day all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
there's just I was just reading in the chat room as you were sharing with us, there are people who are having their own experiences that they're now sharing because of what you're sharing. So thank you for opening that platform for others to share what they are experiencing as well. It's important to share stories like this, right? Because we feel so alone when we're going through whatever it is we're going through, especially when it comes to your health and not finding the answers.
Yeah, I think it feels really lonely, even when you're surrounded by love, mm-hmm. Because your loved ones probably haven't gone through something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of your friends probably haven't gone through something like that or aren't currently going through something like that. So they can say that they're there and you can feel the love, but it still feels really lonely because they can't even come close to knowing what you're going through. Right. And you get tired. It's exhausting and it's really difficult when you're suffering to find the energy to keep going, to keep looking for answers. And I mentioned to you, like when that explosion happened in my head, like when I was on the tetracycline, I lost my ability to read. And so it seemed like dyslexia, like the words would jump all over the place. And my brain is just kind of recovering. So I'm slowly getting back to where I can read again. Mm-hmm. But I thought, well, how am I going to continue to search for answers? Like, how am I going to research now? Right. So I found ways to do it. And one of the ways was like Audible, and I would find ways to close my eyes and listen, or I would go into these groups on Facebook. And that's another thing I cannot recommend enough. And normally, and I think I talked to you this, AJ, normally, so I don't like to, it's very science-minded and analytical in a way. Like I want answers. When I'm looking, I don't want the drama. I don't want to hear about all the emotional stuff. I want to find my answer, right? And then I can appreciate all that stuff later. So I really stayed away from support groups because I thought, you're going to bring me down when I'm looking for answers. But at a certain point, I wasn't getting very far with some of the doctors. And so I thought, no, I need to go and research what this looks like for another Lyme patient. Like, why are these things happening to me? And are they happening to other Lyme patients? So I would go on Facebook and I would join a Lyme disease group. And that's where I quickly learned, a lot of my symptoms were aligning with Lyme, but some of these weird ones after that explosion weren't aligning, right? And so then I would join a POTS group. And then I would learn, okay, some of these symptoms are aligning and some of them are not. Mm-hmm. And eventually I joined the cerebral spinal fluid leak group. And you find not only the doctors to go to in your area, because a lot of people will say, I think I have a cerebral spinal fluid leak, or I think I might have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So that's another support group I'm in. Where do I even start? If you go in these groups, there's people in there that are going through it with you, maybe are further along in their journey, or have completely recovered, and they are just being gracious and coming back and helping others. And so you can say, I'm in Arizona. I think I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Who is the best geneticist? I think I have a cerebral spinal fluid leak. What neurologist should I go to? And they will tell you the best ones in your area. And they'll also tell you who to stay away from. So I learned to listen, and I would research those doctors even more. And that's, who I would end up going to. It's really like a great, great resource. And, I would stay away from when the conversations became down or just a little bit too heavy on my heart. I would get the information I needed and move on.
Right.
But I also made a pact very early on that as I started to progress and as I started to heal, that I would absolutely come back and help others. So I am not a social media person. I didn't even know anything about TikTok. Like, our oldest son told me I needed to go on there. Mm-hmm. I am only on there 100% to try and help others. Because, even back before any of this happened, when I considered myself like healthy and, was practicing yoga and in all of these different things and like achieving, I remember, so I don't go to church on Sunday more because I've been introduced to so many religions throughout my lifetime, and there's so many rules. So it got all pretty confusing to me, but I've always prayed, and God is in my heart like every second of the day. It makes me emotional. So I always fall asleep praying. And I remember back then praying and saying, I'm so appreciative for my career and my husband and our kids, and you've given me so much, but I feel like I'm supposed to be helping people, and I don't feel like I'm doing that. Like, not to the degree that I feel I need to be or want to be. Like, in the pharmaceutical industry, there's like, you can't quite get to the patient, right? It's always the doctor and you, and there's like a barrier. So I remember praying for that. So when all of this happened a couple of years later, I remembered that prayer. And in my darkest hour, and after praying some nights for God to like take my life, because I would never do it. I would never insult him in that way. And I would never do that to my family or my kids. But I certainly got to a point where I was praying to go.
Right.
And when it didn't happen, I remembered how I used to pray and say, I think I'm supposed to be helping people. And something just came to mind like, all right, he's not taking you. You prayed to die. You prayed to go, and you're stuck here. This is obviously happening for a reason. So kind of suck it up, breathe, lean on your husband and your family, use your resources, find the answers, because you're supposed to help others. Mm-hmm. It makes me emotional. So
it's beautiful.
That's the only way I can make sense of it all as well. Why would I go through all of this?
I also feel like it's good to have something to believe in that's bigger than you, especially when you're going through something so challenging and you're suffering so much.
Yeah. Well, it's been helpful, and like I said, it just helps me make sense of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel, I feel that in the end, like I will not only be back to my previous life and functioning, but I feel like I will exceed it. So, and I feel like I'm on that trek.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not there yet. And I have days where, you know, I wax and I wane and I'm like, why am I down now after I was doing well for a couple of days? And then the kind of like the terrifying part of it is trying to figure out, oh, is this part Lyme?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to treat Lyme again? Is this part the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that I need to become more familiar with? Or am I still leaking? Do I need to find a few more of these leak areas? So it becomes overwhelming and a bit confusing, but it makes sense. And I think the other thing that like keeps me up at night sometimes too is when I'm in these support groups for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and CFS leaks and Lyme disease, I'm seeing the same people from the Lyme disease groups and the CSF leak groups and there's some type of overlap.
Absolutely.
And so I talked to my Lyme doctor about this and I'm like, hey, what do you think is going on? So when I went back to him and said, I think, you know, I have brain sag and it looks like I have a cerebrospinal fluid leak, he wrote to Stanford on my behalf and was a part of what helped get me into the Stanford facility.
Wow.
Because he's like, oh, of course. Mm-hmm. But I said, what do you think? Like, do you think this is has anything to do with the Lyme world, or is this all the Ehlers-Danlos world? He said, oh, I think it could be either. And I said, well, how do you think a CSF leak would be connected to Lyme? And he said, because Lyme attacks your connective tissue. And in the same way, could possibly cause a CSF leak. There is a physician by the name of Dr. Neil Spector. So he was in oncology and in research at Duke University. For years and years, he was dealing with heart issues, again, at Duke, right? He is a doctor amongst peers, would get his heart tested. They told him, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. At some point, he finds out he's got heart block and needs a heart transplant. And it ends up being all because he has Lyme disease, right? So now this oncologist gets very involved in Lyme and research, partners with my doctor. And I will tell you, so he's unfortunately now passed away, but he is a Lyme hero. Anyone in the Lyme world pretty much knows Dr. Neil Spector. There is a segment on YouTube called Lyme and Reason. So Lyme and Reason. So that has Dr. Phillips and Dr. Spector in it. It's awesome. But he ultimately passed away from Lyme disease. But a few months before he did, I was on the support group on Facebook for cerebrospinal fluid leaks. And I saw a post from Dr. Neil Spector from the Lyme world. And I'm like, what's he doing in my cerebrospinal fluid leak world, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was posting and he was sharing with the CSF leak patients that he was seeing more patients in the Lyme world that had cerebrospinal fluid leaks. And he was there trying to figure out as a doctor the connection between the two.
Wow.
So there's some type of connection. So as crazy as it sounds, like how could you have all these things? If you're a patient in my world, you know exactly that there's a good chance you have all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Once you learn, once you educate yourself and have that understanding. I just pulled up TikTok to show everyone your long list of TikToks, and the first one I got was yours. You know, when you first sign in and then
good.
It's working. It's working, Nicole. But oh, that's weird. It says you don't have any published videos. That's not true.
No.
I don't know why it's not showing them, but it's not showing them. But I want everyone to go. If you're not a fan of TikTok, it's okay. You don't have to have a membership. You don't have to sign in. You can watch the videos without an account. The handle here is on the screen, .stranger.angel. And I encourage you guys to go and check out what Nicole has created to share with all of you. Her videos do go in way more depth than she was able to share with us tonight, but you carried the show. Thank you. You shared with us the entire time, and I know there's still so much to share. So go and visit her Instagram or TikTok. TikTok has all of the videos. I know you're sharing some on Instagram at strangerangel_insta. Oh my goodness, Nicole, you've been through so much, and I'm sure stuff like this, spending time with us, is definitely going to wipe you out. I have infinite amounts of gratitude for you showing up and sharing with us. I know it's so important to share your story, and I'm so glad the treatments are giving you some relief, and I hope for so much more for you. It's really neat to have you here and have the interaction in the chat rooms where our guests, they're all popping up here on the screen. They're sharing their stories. You're giving them permission, if you will, right? Because you're sharing yours, it gives them a safe place to share theirs. And that's just a beautiful thing. And I'm just totally grateful for you and everything that you have shared. I can't say it enough. It's so good.
Thank you.
Do you have
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another minute. Did you get to share everything you wanted to share?
I think so. I think just go to the TikTok. I mean, hopefully I'll be on YouTube or something else soon when I have more energy. This just seemed to be the easiest platform for now.
Right.
But I share on a daily basis pretty much. So if you
so good.
get on TikTok, join me there.
Yes, follow her. And then it also helps her if you guys like her videos and
share. It will get word out to others.
People. Yes. Comment. It just is a great way for her to spread the information around so that she can help more and more people. And you're also helping in that. Oh my goodness, it already happened. 2 hours. We are done. Thank you again a million times.
Thank you, AJ.
Nicole. I appreciate your time, your energy, and your patience. And I hope that we didn't wipe you out too much.
Not at all. So thanks for having me. I hoped we helped somebody out there. So
I already know you have. You're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. And to all of you who are hanging out with us in the chat room, so grateful for you guys also. It's really neat to have your interaction in the chat room with you guys connecting and talking with each other and sharing as you do, and also supporting me and Soul Wandering. You guys are the best. I'm so grateful. Until next week, we'll see you then. Be good to yourself and be good to each other. Good night, everyone.
Take care.